to our sustainable homestead. This video will take a tour of our forest garden. This is a tropical forest garden. It's a work in progress. All this has been planted in the last 2 months, mostly the last 6 weeks. So it's been a lot of work. I wanted to briefly explain what we're doing and take a little bit of a tour to show you a better idea of what we're doing. We have maybe 75 fruit trees in the various garden beds. I call this garden bed 1 because it's closest to our potting shed, our shade structure. The trees are small to save money and also because they grow faster. We've learned that if you get big trees, it's harder to get root bound in the pot. So we like to buy these small trees, about 24 to 30 inches high. Here we have a ground cover to help hold the soil, reduce erosion, and this will be chopped and dropped to build the soil. We'll cut it when it starts to flower. This is a special ground cover that was recommended for our climate. We have some eggplants here. The trees are small, a little bit hard to see. Like here's a sugar apple right here. This is an apricot tree. It looks like an apricot, more of a native apricot. So you can see after 6 weeks now, it's starting to grow put out some new growth. If you watched our previous videos, you'll remember that all this was raised about 24 inches. It varies from about 24 inches to 30 inches because the land was not perfectly flat. Now it's almost perfectly flat. So the thickness of this subsoil that we trucked in, it varies in depth slightly. Mostly it drains this way and that way. It drains off to the surrounding rice fields. And the main thing I want to talk about now is how we planted the trees. So you can't just plant a tree directly into subsoil. The tree roots would not like that. Almost everything would die. Okay, so the first thought is, well, let's bring in lots of topsoil and compost and build up, maybe till in lots of compost in the bed. But you can't do that here. This is a tropical climate. Again, we're surrounded by rice fields. When it rains, it really rains. So that top layer would become super saturated and basically kill everything. So we're trying to learn from others' experience. So far it's working okay. Instead of trying to build up the entire surface of the bed, we have to take it in stages over several years. In the first stage is we started with our fruit trees. And that's what I want to talk about now. What we did is we dug 50 centimeters or 2 foot wide tree holes. We had to dig down, very, very hard work, dig down through that compacted clay subsoil. We dug down until we hit the rice field below. This is the best part of the project. We used inexpensive subsoil to raise the site. Okay, so the tree roots only have to go down about this deep until they hit fertile rice field below. And of course, once those trees hit the water table down at the rice field, then we shouldn't have to ever water them again. So we're hoping after maybe 1 year, we'll never have to water the trees again. And that's important because we want them to shade the rest of the garden to minimize irrigation. And eventually, after a few years, we shouldn't have to water anything. It will be just like a forest in nature. You know, no fertilizing, no watering. It will all be self-sustaining forest. But in our case, it's a forest garden. Everything will be edible or somehow beneficial to the process, such as these ground covers. See, they're reducing erosion and building the soil. So every plant has a purpose, and that's what we're learning, is where to put what, the spacing. Every bed is an experiment. Every bed is different. So now back to planting the trees. Again, we had to dig all these holes, 70 or 80 big holes. What we ended up doing was, it's very, very hard work, so we just dug down a little ways, and then we filled them with water, and over the period of maybe 2 weeks, we just kept adding water, and we'd come back the next day, and we had to dig down in layers because the soil was just simply too hard. And because it's mostly clay, it took that long for the water to percolate down through the clay. Then what we did is we made a mixture, a planting mixture for the trees of rice-hulls. You can see over here a big pile of rice-hulls. This is just the residue from milling rice we got from the rice mill. We use dry cow manure. We use rice hull ash, basically burned rice hulls, and some coconut husk. Over there you can see everything very, very low cost. And this was mixed with some topsoil, about 60% topsoil, 40% planting mix. This was mixed in the hole in layers. We planted the tree so the base of the tree is level with the surface of the ground. The good trees, the biggest trees, the most valuable trees, we added a bag of potting soil around the tree, around the root ball, to kind of give it a little bit of an edge. Then we backfilled, made it a mound. Every tree has a mound on top. Otherwise, too much water will go in the tree hole and the trees will drown. So usually you want a well. Many parts of the world you'd have a well to help hold the water. This is the opposite. You have to build up a mound to keep the excess water away. So that's the basic tree planting technique that we've used. It's described in detail on our natural building blog. I give you the recipe, all the details of what we're doing here at Natural Building Blog, where we mostly talk about natural building, but more and more we're talking about organic gardening, different gardening techniques, forest gardening, because your food supply is so important. Everything nowadays seems like it's contaminated. There's GMO, pesticides, herbicides, chemical fertilizers. The food is tainted in factories. Many, many different problems with our food supply. The healthiest, best way and the lowest cost way is just to grow it yourself. So our goal here, this area right here, this can supply our family, once it's up and running here, free food for the rest of our life. Because we're going to choose plants that are perennial, self-sustaining, and eventually this forest will achieve a certain balance where there's very little labor. I've been told in about 3 years the fruit trees will start producing fruit. So they'll be up maybe 7, 8 feet tall. In 3 years we can start getting fruit. And from that point onward is where it really starts to take off. And it's an ongoing process. This is just the early stage. This is what we've done in the last few weeks. We'll just keep building the soil, keep adding plants, and it'll just get better and better and better. Okay, I think that's everything for now. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for our next video.